that he put there are people that are going to do the job.
The focus has now shifted to who is likely to become part of the cabinet after the presidential inauguration of President Cyril Ramaphosa, and there were concerns that the sixth administration had a bloated cabinet. And now the Centre for Development and Enterprise is calling for considerable reduction in cabinet size, as well as a fundamental reorganization of the presidency. To unpack this further, I'm joined by Executive Director of the Centre for Development and Enterprise, Anne Bernstein. Good afternoon to you, Anne. Thank you so much for your time. What is a considerable reduction? What size should the cabinet be? Where is it at the moment? If we were to use the analogy of dress sizes, if it's a 40 plus, is it supposed to become a perfect 10? What is your analysis?
Look, let's start at the beginning. The country's in deep trouble, and we need the heart of government, the executive of government, to be committed to reform, to be effective, and to be honest people. So the larger your executive is, the harder it is to get agreement on key policy decisions and to form a collegial group of people who are going to lead the country. We're saying that we need to do things differently from the past, and we've put up a stab at a cabinet which goes from 30 ministers, as it is today, to 20. And we're perfectly aware that we're now in a government of national unity, but we're really saying that for the country to get what we need very competent leaders, and that the president should use his prerogative for two ministers to be appointed to his cabinet who are not members of parliament. He should use this prerogative really strategically. We need talent and expertise from outside politics to help the country get out of the crisis that we face.
And those two ministers that are not in the National Assembly currently, Anne, what kind of criteria would the president then use, besides the fact that he has the powers to appoint? And where would these ministers then be sourced from, and which key positions are they, or what role would they play in the presidency?
Look, at the heart of everything is economic growth. We have to get faster economic growth and job-rich economic growth. And the expertise for that, a lot of it lies outside of politics. So we're saying, in addition to all the politicians who are going to be appointed, let's look at a big economic ministry. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the minister who was there in the sixth government administration has retired. So there's a big opening there for an economic person with expertise in economics, who understands global economies, who understands the potential of South Africa to be a much bigger economy for both big companies and smaller companies. So we need to grow the economy as big as we can, as fast as we can, to give millions, hundreds of millions of people who don't have a job, who would like to work, an opportunity.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, and it's unprecedented, or is this maybe international best practices, that if you do employ an expert who is non-partisan and who is, a high achiever in their own space? Has it been done? What kind of examples can we cite how the more advanced economies, form their cabinets?
There are lots of examples in the United States and the United Kingdom where they bring in one or two people who are not professional politicians. And I want to stress again, so I don't think this is unusual. The Constitution allows this for a reason. President Mandela did it in the 90s when we needed stability. He brought in a former banker to help him, a former business chief executive of a big company. So this is not unprecedented. And I want to stress again, we're a country in deep trouble. nearly 6 out of 10 people are living in poverty, and some 12 million South Africans who want to work cannot find a job, especially young people. So we need expertise in the cabinet. We need to find the right people to help South Africa get out of the trouble that we're in.
Yeah, but let's look at what the GNU or a likely pushback from other parties as well with the suggestion of a reduced cabinet, because that means they would have lesser representation and some of them would have to be out of a job, and whether that would be, acceptable for the General National Assembly.
Look, my job is to say what would be good for South Africa. We're talking about less cabinet ministers. We're saying there will be deputy ministers as well, and very small parties could look to positions there perhaps. But the president has a lot of patronage at his disposal, not just the cabinet. And he has to be guided by what's in the national interest. So I think the big parties in the GNU need to get the proportional number of seats that the deal announced on Friday allows for. But I think we need to look beyond the cabinet as well to other positions of importance in our society. So we have to come back to what's good for South Africa. This is not, the new government isn't just about positions and power and party politics. It's about the priorities for action to make this a more prosperous and more inclusive country. So it's important to remember we've got a country to fix, and we need a government that's fit for purpose and a cabinet that's able to do the job.
And very briefly, Anne, there are obviously performance appraisals or some measure that sees the effectiveness of a minister or member of cabinet, or even the oversight committees. Or is it a case of, just as you're saying, being rewarded for being a career politician, and because of your proportional representation, you are guaranteed a seat for at least 5 years without necessarily the interventions in between if you are failing as a minister or a deputy or whatever position you're in?
Well, I think if we look at the state of the country, the cabinet in the 6th administration and the one before that was not impressive overall. I think the Ministry of Finance has been well managed, but it's hard to think of a lot of other ministries that are also well led and well managed. So we've got to do things differently. Now, the biggest performance management test is the general election, and voters have given the government of the 6th administration an enormous shock, from 57.8% to 40-something. This is unprecedented and is healthy for our democracy. So we're saying that it's absolutely vital we do things differently now than we've been doing them in the past. And we need people of real competence and expertise and leadership ability and integrity. And we need to make sure they have clear targets. The president needs to choose priorities for reform. He needs to set targets with his ministers. And then if they don't meet them, there need to be consequences. And we never saw that in the last administration. So just like you and I have targets and we're judged on whether we're doing a good job or not, so should be the case with cabinet ministers, and very importantly also their senior officials. We're also saying that senior officials need to be the best possible people for South Africa at this time. They need to be committed to reform. They need to be hardworking. They need to be honest. And we need to look at very practical recommendations that we've put forward now in 2 different documents on mission critical jobs for the new government and reorganizing the cabinet and streamlining the presidency.
We certainly hope to see your input being implemented, and as you're saying, it's for the greater good of the country, and that consequence management ought not to only be a buzzword. We need to see it from our leaders as to what type of nation they are leading, and to make excellence a habit. So, you know, we're not dealing with mediocrity and all sorts of things that are just derailing the trajectory of the country. But Anne, thank you so much. I really appreciate you chatting to us. That is Executive Director of the Center for Development and Enterprise, Anne Bernstein. They have submitted to the President certain changes or proposals in reducing the size of Cabinet so that it is more streamlined and more efficient. Still to come on today, there's high optimism that the new administration will result